Spin your passion into a business with Shopify and break sales records with the world's best converting checkout. Let's hear that one more time. The world's best converting checkout. Shopify's legendary checkout makes it easier for customers to shop on your website, across social media, and everywhere in between. Now that's music to your ears. Any way you spin it, you can be a smash hit with Shopify. Start your $1 a month trial today at shopify.com/records.
Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, it's Susan Kaufman, and you are listening to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts Audio. And we welcome an expert guest today, Laura Stevens, MS, who is a food and nutrition researcher at Purdue University and the author of 12 Effective Ways to Help Your ADD, ADHD Child. Her topics are of great interest. She's going to talk about artificial food colors, flavors, and preservatives, and how they can negatively affect your child, about common food sensitivities and how to determine if your child has one, about the importance of essential fatty acids, and about some special diets, such as the Fine Gold diet, as well as an elimination diet to test for food sensitivities, and lots more. Before we start, I just want to thank so much our sponsor. Omega Bright is an omega-3 formula that delivers high EPA anti-inflammatory benefits for cognitive clarity and positive mood. It was formulated over 15 years ago, and Omega Bright sets the gold standard for purity, for concentration, and for scientific efficacy in omega-3s. For more information, please visit the Omega Bright website. It's www.omegabright.com. So let me turn it over to Laura Stevens with our thanks.
Thank you for having me. This afternoon, I'm going to talk about ADHD-friendly nutrition strategies for your child and teen. Helping a child with ADHD is like solving a jigsaw puzzle. You have to identify the pieces that are important for your child. So there are biological pieces, nutritional, environmental, psychological, and educational. This is a jigsaw puzzle of a child's brain, and it shows different possible puzzle pieces. And unfortunately, they're different for different children. There are many possible puzzle pieces. They range from sleep, both the quality and the quantity of it, exercise, toxic chemicals avoidance, vitamins and minerals, certain ones of them, sweeteners, and an A-plus diet, which is a super nutritious diet. And as part of an A-plus diet, you will want to avoid artificial food colors, flavors, and preservatives. These don't belong in an A-plus diet. I'm going to talk about those in just a minute. I will also talk about food sensitivities and essential fatty acids. So why is it so important to eat an A-plus diet? Well, if you think about it, your child's body is the most amazing chemical factory ever designed. There are all these raw materials over on the left, the amino acids, the fatty acids, the vitamins, the minerals, oxygen, glucose, and water. And these must be delivered by the gastrointestinal tract to your child's front door. And in his factory, there are many, many different assembly lines. And the raw materials go on the right assembly lines, and they produce over 100,000 different chemicals. These come out the back door of the factory and include brain cells, neurotransmitters, and many other things in the body. It's also important to avoid certain things. You don't want to gum up the assembly lines so that they perform erratically or shut down. So the first thing we're going to talk about are artificial food dyes. There are actually 9 artificial food dyes allowed by the Food and Drug Administration in our foods and beverages. Actually, only 7 of them are used at all today. Each batch must be certified by the FDA for purity and safety. And in case you didn't know it, you might be interested that artificial food dyes are derived from petroleum. Here are the most common food dyes: Allure Red FD&C, red number 40. Now, the Allure Red is the common name. FD&C stands for Foods, Drugs, and Cosmetics. It can be used in any of those. And it's red number 40 is the way it usually is on labels. And you can see it's a very bright red color. The next one is yellow number 5. It's a bright yellow. Yellow number 6, which is kind of a goldish yellow, and blue, which is a bright blue color. There are other dyes that are used, blue 2, green 3, red number 3, but these are used less frequently than the others. Over the years, there's been a dramatic increase in the consumption of food dyes in the United States and this data comes from the Food and Drug Administration. Back in 1950, the amount of dye consumed per person per day was about 12 milligrams. And then we see that it dramatically increased, so it's at least 5 times that in 2010, about 62 milligrams. So where are all these colors found? We want to read all food, drug, and cosmetics labels. And if a food or beverage looks too pretty, it's probably dyed with artificial colors. So here's a slide that shows all the different places that food dyes are found. In snack food, in regular foods, in beverages, in personal care products like mouthwash and toothpaste, in children's vitamins, and in children's Tylenol. Most children's medicines, both over-the-counter and prescription medicines, contain food dye. Now, I thought these were surprising places for dyes. First, we have Pillsbury vanilla marshmallow fluffy icing, and it actually says on the label, colors added. In the middle, we see pickles, and pickles are generally dyed with blue 1 and yellow 5. And Catalina has both red 40 and blue 1 in it. And even marshmallows some marshmallows say that they contain a small amount of blue dye. So why are they used at all? Well, the one reason is to replace colors lost during processing with heat and acid. They tend to break down otherwise. To standardize color in products so that if you buy something in New York City, it will be the same as what you would buy in Los Angeles. Another reason is to match the artificial flavor. If you have an artificially flavored beverage with artificial strawberry flavor, then you will want to color it with red dye. But the most important reason, perhaps, is to attract consumers, especially children. Children love the bright colors. I guess even the cat does too. So all of this has led to a big controversy over the years. It began in the 1970s when Dr. Benjamin Feingold, an allergist at the Kaiser Permanente Medical Center in California, noticed that children who were hyperactive also, once the dyes were removed from their diets, that their behavior improved dramatically. So he was so impressed by this that he wrote a book, Why Your Child is Hyperactive. And it was a bestseller among parents. However, scientists were not convinced because they didn't approve of the way Feingold had made his conclusions. They felt that he hadn't done statistics to prove his point. His Feingold diet contained no artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives, and no foods containing natural salicylates, which were aspirin-like compounds in certain vegetables and fruits. So this led to a big controversy, as I said. So in the mid-70s, there were challenge studies to see what challenging children with dyes would look like. So they generally used just 26 milligrams of mixed dyes and a placebo, and this was double-blind crossover study. And there were very few responders who seemed to be worse after eating the dyes. However, larger doses of dyes led to more children reacting. So the 26 was perhaps not a good choice. So we decided to see at Purdue, my colleagues and I decided to see, well, just how much dye is in different beverages and foods. So the dye amounts in beverages, this is in just 8 ounces. Red beverages range from 0.2 milligrams to 50 milligrams, orange up to 19.9, yellow 10.5, and blue 12.5. So you could see why a child's diet could easily surpass 26 milligrams a day. I mean, those were just the beverages, not actual foods too. So we decided that it could reach 100 milligrams or more per day. So we really need studies to measure the amounts in children's diets in the United States, and future challenge studies should take that amount into account. There are two interesting studies from the United Kingdom, one in 2004 that looked at healthy preschoolers. They gave these preschoolers either a placebo or 20 milligrams of artificial dye mix plus sodium benzoate, a common preservative. And they found that when the children received the actual dye and sodium benzoate, they had a significant increase in hyperactivity. And McCann, in 2007, studied a group of 3-year-olds and 8 to 9-year-olds. And they computed a score, the global hyperactivity score, based on parent and teacher rating and a computer test of attention for the older children. What was interesting was that both hyperactive children and non-hyperactive children had increased scores, suggesting that perhaps the dyes were a general public health concern. Then, starting in 2010, the European Union required a warning label on each food that contained artificial dye, and the label read, "May have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children." In the United States, the Center for Science and the Public Interest petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to hold a hearing, and it lasted for 2 days, on whether there should be a similar message or warning label in the U.S. or whether they should just be banned altogether. At the end, there was a panel, and they voted, and the vote was very close, that labels should not be added, and the food dyes seemed to be safe. However, they did admit that a subpopulation of the children react to these dyes. The Center for Science and Public Interest has an interesting website, Food Dyes, A Rainbow of Risks, and this is free for you. So if you're in the United States and you consume orange soda, you're going to consume red 40 and yellow 5. But in Britain, you're going to be drinking pumpkin and carrot extract. Strawberry Nutri-Grain bars in the U.S., food dyes, and in Britain, natural dyes. And McDonald's strawberry sundaes are colored with red 40, but in Britain, they actually add real strawberries. But I think things are changing with the food manufacturers. Nestle has announced that it will remove all artificial food dyes from its candies. Hershey, a couple days later, I think in trying to keep up with Nestle, said that the labels would have simpler ingredients that are easy to understand. I'm not quite sure what that means. So is yellow number 5 easy to understand? I don't know. We'll see. So Kraft has said that they will take all yellow dyes out of its macaroni and cheeses. Taco Bell and Panera have said they will use no artificial colors or high fructose corn syrup. However, if you buy a beverage there, you will likely be consuming some artificial food dyes. General Mills has said that they're going to take dyes out of their cereals. But the big question that you want to know is your child sensitive to artificial food colors? So you want to play detective. So you want to buy the little box of the assorted food dyes, and first you want to avoid all the artificial food colors, artificial food flavors, preservatives for 1 to 2 weeks. Then ask yourself, is my child doing better? Then you want to start with 3 drops of each color into a glass of water. The result will be kind of a muddy-looking liquid. Before you start, ask your child to read from an age-appropriate book, to write its name, to draw a picture, to solve some math problems. Observe his overall behavior. So is this your child 1/2 to 2 hours after the dyes? Is she calm, reasonable, happy, reading well? Or is he frustrated, irritable? Does he show reading problems, and his penmanship is worse? Or is he overactive, inattentive, impulsive, aggressive, angry? Does he have sleep problems that night? Or does she have a runny nose, a headache, stomach ache, or muscle aches? If there's no change in your child's behavior or health symptoms, you can repeat the test but double the amount of dyes used. So instead of 3 drops, you would use 6 drops of each color. And if there is a change, you definitely want to avoid all artificial food dyes flavorings, and preservatives. So what about common foods that are not artificial? Can they cause symptoms of ADHD? Well, there were 2 studies in Britain that reported that no child was sensitive to artificial food dyes alone, but to at least 2 common foods. So when researchers tested food dyes and preservatives, 79% of the children tested had a response to the food dyes. 73% responded to soy, 64% responded to milk, 59% to chocolate, and there were other foods that caused problems. So if you try a common foods elimination diet, you would avoid all additives, you would avoid all milk products, but you can serve rice, almond, and coconut milk. You want to avoid chocolate and cocoa. You want to avoid wheat, rye, barley, but you can serve oats, rice cakes, crackers, rice noodles, any gluten-free product. You also want to avoid eggs and processed meats. They've been in the news recently as a possible cause of cancer. So you want to serve unprocessed meats, poultry, fish. You want to avoid citrus, but you can serve all other kinds of fruits. You want to avoid corn and legumes. Legumes include peanuts, beans, peas, carrots, soy, and soy oil. But you can serve all other vegetables. You want to avoid peanuts and any nuts, seeds processed in soy, corn, or peanut oil. You can give your child any other nuts and seeds, but you should keep in mind that any child who is sensitive, has been shown a sensitivity to tree nuts, should not eat them. So you should try this common foods elimination diet for about 1 to 2 weeks. And you want to add back one food 1 to 3 times per day. And you want to ask yourself, is my child worse? If yes, keep the food or food additive out of the diet and add back a different food the next day. Then several months later, you could try adding back one food, say once a week. Is there any reaction? If yes, you want to avoid it again for several months. If not, serve the food just once a week. You can do this. It's not easy, but it's doable. Results could be very important. It does require careful meal planning, grocery shopping, label reading, and the cooperation of your family. Remember, what you don't look for will probably not be found. Now I'm going to talk about essential fatty acids. Do some children with ADHD need oiling? So what are essential fatty acids? Well, they're called essential because they're essential to everybody's diet. Your own body cannot make them. They form all cell membranes, and they're precursors to eicosanoids, which are cell-to-cell communicators, help cells talk to each other. And essential fatty acids waterproof our cells. They keep the watery inside and the watery consistency outside. So you've heard of the essential fatty acids. There are omega-6s and omega-3s. This is an omega-6 fatty acid. It's linoleic acid. It has 18 carbons, 2 double bonds. You can see them here for those of you with a little chemistry. And 6 because the first double bond appears on the 6th carbon. And you can see that double bonds cause a little kink in the molecule. So what are food sources? Well, safflower, sunflower, corn oil, sesame, peanut and peanut oils, and soy oil. And generally, Americans are getting too much omega-6s. Now, this is alpha-linolenic acid, and it's an omega-3 fatty acid. Perhaps you've heard about omega-3 fatty acids. This alpha-linolenic acid is the first member in its family, and it also has 18 carbons like linoleic acid, 3 double bonds starting on the 3rd carbon from the left. And you can see that this molecule has an even greater kink in it. So food sources of omega-3 fatty acids are flaxseed oil, canola oil, soybeans, navy, and kidney beans, so not all beans, walnuts and walnut oils, dark green leafy vegetables, and generally Americans need more omega-3 fatty acids. There are also long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. You may have read about EPA and DHA. They have more carbons in their molecules, 22 to be specific, and more double bonds. But they too are omega-3 fatty acids. Most of them are found in cold water fish, which might be fresh canned tuna, salmon, trout, mackerel, or sardines. So not all fish. And you want to maintain a balance between the omega-6s and omega-3s. So this shows that we are generally consuming too much omega-6s and not enough omega-3s. So how do you know about your child, whether he might have essential fatty acid deficiency? Well, there are 7 symptoms associated with EFA insufficiency. So does he show excessive thirst? Is he always going to the drinking fountain? Is he the first in the family to go to the sink to get a drink of water? Does he show frequent urination? And you might think, well, if he drinks more, then he's going to have more frequent urination. But we actually had some kids in a study who would have one but not necessarily the other. Also, these 2 symptoms, the thirst and the frequent urination, are symptoms of juvenile diabetes. So often parents take their child to the doctor and say, I'm worried because I think maybe my child has juvenile diabetes, but the tests are usually normal. The third symptom is dry, unmanageable hair. The fourth is dry skin. The next is dandruff. Brittle nails is next. Follicular keratoses, which are tiny, hard little bumps on the backs of the arms. This picture shows the forearms, but it's usually the backs of the arms or the front of the thighs. And in our Purdue studies of essential fatty acids in ADHD, we found the more essential fatty acid deficiency symptoms, the lower the amount of fatty acids, the essential fatty acids in the plasma. There are several different kinds of supplements. The first one is ground flax and flaxseed oil. These provide the short-chain omega-3 fatty acids, and the dose is 1 to 3 teaspoons or possibly more. I'd start with 1 for a week, and if there's no change, then I'd go to 2 teaspoons a day the next week. And if he seems a little better on that dose in any way, then I would not increase it to 3, because too much of these fatty acids can cause the very symptoms you're trying to avoid. So just stay with the 2 teaspoons. So every child needs a different amount of these. Then there's fish oil. These are the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA, 1 to 3 capsules. And again, it's the same thing there. More is not necessarily better. So you would want to start with 1, try 2, and then if there's no improvement, try 3. And that's about all that kids usually need. Primrose oil, which is an omega-6 fatty acid, the dose is 1 to 6 500 milligram capsules. And they should be started the same way you did with the others. And some children require all 3 of these. So I hope I've given you some food for thought. ADHD is like a jigsaw puzzle. We have only talked about 3 pieces today. There are many other very important puzzle pieces. Each child is different with a unique puzzle. And that's really too bad, because it would be so nice to be able to present a plan for each child that is the same as every other child. So you may have one child who has severe sleep problems, and if you fix those, his personality may dramatically change. You may have another child who has essential fatty acid deficiency, and giving that child fatty acids can make a huge difference. You may have a third child who's sensitive to food dyes, milk and chocolate, or perhaps another child to food dyes, corn and wheat. You may have another child who's sensitive to iron and or zinc, and is low in these, and then giving them supplements can really help. But no child who should be given iron unless it's proven by a blood test that serum ferritin is low. You might have another child who's sensitive to pollens and chemicals. So different children have different puzzle pieces. And for that reason, I've written a new book, Solving the Puzzle of Your ADD, ADHD Child, Natural Alternatives for Hard-to-Raise Children. And the purpose of this book is to help parents search for what pieces of the puzzle might be missing for their child. So I tried to simplify as much as I could. So, for example, at the beginning of a chapter, there may be statements that you are asked to check off about your child and his symptoms. So you will get an idea just checking those, reading those statements, whether that chapter could be important for your child. If it's not, if it doesn't seem to describe your child, you can go right on to the next chapter and do the questionnaire there. I have a website that tells you more about the book. It's youradhdnewsletter.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at lstevens@nlci.com. That concludes my presentation. I'll take your questions now.
Thanks so much. That was really fascinating. You mentioned before we started that you also had some slides on sugar. I wonder if it would be worth your doing an overview on sugar now before we
Sure,
start.
I'd be glad to. A lot of parents want to know, well, every time my child eats sugar, he takes off and swings from the chandeliers. But a lot of the studies have not shown that sugar provokes behavior changes. But it's now known that any sweetener, including artificial sweeteners, disrupts dopamine and dopamine receptors in the brain. And this can lead to alterations in behavior, binge eating, and ADHD symptoms. So just about every agency is recommending that we reduce the amount of sugar in our diets. And this is from the American Heart Association, because sugar has been associated with diabetes and heart disease. So for preschoolers, they recommend no more than 4 teaspoons. For ages 4 to 8, 3 teaspoons. And for preteens and teens, 5 to 8 teaspoons. And I want to remind you that a can or 12-ounce soft drink contains almost 10 teaspoons of sugar. So that wouldn't be a whole can, wouldn't be allowed for any of those kids. If you want to know how much sugar is in a particular product that you're buying, you want to go on to the label in the food facts and look at where it says about the grams of sugar. And keep in mind that 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 teaspoon of sugar. Sugar consumption over time has just really taken off. In 1700, the average Englishman consumed 4 pounds a year. In 1800, 18 pounds. In 1900, 47 pounds. And then in 2010, 77 pounds. That's more than 15 bags of 5-pound bags of sugar per year. So my sweetener recommendations are greatly reduce sugar in diet for better health and behavior. Test your child for sugar sensitivities. You can go back to the test for the food dyes and substitute sugar as the test material and see if your child reacts. And try to satisfy your sugar cravings with fruits. You want to avoid all high fructose corn syrup, and you can use small amounts of alternative sweeteners like xylitol. My grocery used to carry that, but it doesn't anymore, so I get it online. Monk fruit, which you should be able to get, and stevia. One thing about the xylitol, don't give it to your dogs because it's poisonous for dogs. And remember, artificial sweeteners can also affect dopamine in the brain. So there you have it.
Wow. You answered the question some people asked about artificial sweeteners, especially stevia, but I think you said that stevia was one of the ones that's acceptable in small doses, correct?
That's correct. But if you use a lot of xylitol, well, first of all, you could get diarrhea, because it can cause diarrhea in sensitive people. And it's, if you use too much of it, then this is going to affect the dopamine process in the brain.
Right. I want to just go back to, this is a huge amount of information, and I think most people find the elimination diet very difficult to implement because in its pure form, it's just so onerous. Is there a simplified version that you recommend to parents? I mean, we've had a couple of speakers who said there are 2 or 3 or 4 key items that usually cause trouble, and you maybe can try those first. Do you agree with that? And how would one go about a simplified elimination diet?
Sure. Well, instead of testing all the foods that I suggested, you could avoid all forms of milk, wheat, and perhaps chocolate, and just test for those 3. So you remove them totally from the diet, and then you test each one separately, and then you can determine whether it's wheat, or the others could cause problems.
Are those the big 3? Possibly the.
Yes, I would say so. And then if you, for example, if you're sensitive to one of those, then you may be sensitive to others. So you may want to try another few of the foods that we had eliminated on the common foods elimination diet.
Is there food sensitivity testing that can be done by doctors or in the medical world?
Well, not really. The RAS test for allergies is not really very definitive for this kind of food sensitivity. And so a few doctors do provocative testing that can be helpful, but there aren't very many of these doctors available. So no, there's not an elimination diet is the way to go.
Is the best way, okay.
Then you will see for yourself, milk really does bother him. I think I need to avoid it. So,
one of the participants pointed out that it could take a few days to actually see the results if you take out some key sensitivity items. Is that your experience?
Yes, that's right. I try a milk, wheat, chocolate-free diet for at least a week or 2.
Before drawing any conclusion?
Yes, before challenging with the food.
Okay. Let's see. Lots of questions here. One of the big questions that a lot of parents have is they feel that their children, especially their children with ADHD, have a tendency to really be attracted. I think this is true for all children, I guess, to very sweet and not terribly healthy foods. And they're really looking for help as to how to make a transition to a healthier diet. This may not be your specialty, but I wonder if you have any comments on behavior changes.
I think sugar can be addictive, and some children are addicted. For example, I had a friend who had a child with ADHD, and when he was in the kitchen, he would take the top off the canister of sugar, lick his hand, stick his hand in, and then lick off the sugar. So I think, he had found how to get his sugar fix. And I think dealing with a child who's used to tons of sugar, it may work better if you kind of slowly decrease the amount so that it isn't complete withdrawal all at once. Does that help?
So, yeah, I think that does help. Are there specific snacks that you recommend that parents might consider as healthy?
Sure. Any kind of vegetable sticks like carrots or cucumber or broccoli spears with a tasty dip. I have a recipe in the book for those. Or fruit slices or like cherries or orange slices or melon. And I have another recipe for a fruit dip in there that you can use. So these would make very healthy snacks. You could also use popcorn if your child isn't sensitive to corn. And let's see what else. You could use whole wheat or whole grain crackers with all natural peanut butter if your child is sensitive to peanuts. So I think those are some of the big ones.
Okay. Great suggestion here from Christian, who says, make sure to get your child's buy-in. My child agreed after 2 weeks off artificials and preservatives. He said his brain didn't vibrate anymore.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah.
That is.
Let's see. Someone else says sugar is addictive. Definitely massive flavor of all other foods. Interesting question here about milk. Is this all milk, or is lactose-free milk?
Unfortunately, lactose-free milk. Lactose is the digestive enzyme that reduces the or the lactase is that reduces the lactose in the body and in the stomach. And so if you lack the lactase, then having lactose-free milk would work. But it doesn't affect behavior. It gives you other symptoms like diarrhea and gas and bloating, things like that.
Well, isn't there, there's also casein intolerance in milk, right?
That's
so
right.
I'm not sure it's just lactose. I think if, from what you're saying, maybe eliminating milk completely might be the way to go on a test.
It's true that casein does bother some children, yes, and so really the only way to avoid it is to avoid all cow's milk. And goat milk and things like that often cause problems too.
Right. Oh, really? If you're allergic to cow's milk, you're likely to be allergic to goats and sheep as well?
Yep, that's true.
Oh, dear. What about raw milk and raw butter? That's a question asked.
Yeah, I would recommend not consuming either. It's not going to avoid the problem of behavior reactions to milk.
Okay. Halloween candy. Sorry, you were going to say?
I was just going to say, if your child can't have the milk products, two things. If they can't have milk products, then they need to have a calcium supplement. And so parents should talk to their doctors about how much their child needs every day. This is extremely important for normal growth and of bones and teeth and everything.
Yeah, and don't many of the calcium supplements have milk products in them? That's what I'm allergic to casein myself, so that's been an issue for me, finding calcium supplements that many of the Tums actually have milk products in them, for example.
Well, I choose a supplement that says milk-free.
Milk-free.
And something like calcium citrate or carbonate, those don't have any milk in them.
Right. Someone else points out that if they're consuming calcium from other items like dark green vegetables, almond, or soy milk, they may not need a calcium supplement.
This is true, but not all the milks that replace milk, like the almond and coconut and soy. Not all of them add
soy, coconut.
Not all of them add the calcium to them. So you have to read the labels on the milk substitute.
Yeah, I've been reading recently that almond milk is a bit of a fraud in the sense that it has very little protein in it, and it may be not a fraud, but it may be sort of a marketing ploy more than any health, which is sort of a big blow since I'm a big almond milk consumer. So
I like almond milk too.
I know, but if it's really not, providing the protein that we think it is. Coming back to sugar for a moment, or coming on up to Halloween, you mentioned before we started Halloween candy, and Christian said, look for candy from Sweden. They don't have artificials, and it doesn't affect my child. So, any other comments on Halloween candy?
Well, you can go online and look and just type in sugar-free candies Halloween, and some alternatives will come up. They still may have sugar in them.
Really?
But sometimes on Halloween, there are different ways to approach Halloween. One is to let your child go out and trick-or-treat all he wants, and when he comes home, then let him keep a piece or two of the candies and throw away the rest. Or you could pay him per piece of candy, a nickel or a dime or something, whatever is appropriate. So there are all kinds of ways to handle that. You can also decide, it's Halloween, I'm going to let my child pig out and then face the consequences. If you talk to teachers, a lot of them will say, oh, my classes are just awful after Halloween. So it could be all the sugar, it could be all the dye. It's hard to know.
Okay. A question is, again, people are saying, this sounds really difficult, can our family doctor do blood tests to find out if my child's deficient in zinc or omega fatty acids?
Yes, there are tests for omega-3 fatty acids, but not every lab does them. And when you get the results back, most doctors would not know how to interpret it. They're used mainly for research settings, like what we did at Purdue. And
Okay.
But iron certainly can be tested for by your family doctor. And the test he wants to do is serum ferritin, which is an iron storage thing. And then zinc can also be tested by blood tests.
And we've heard from other specialists that he frequently finds iron and zinc deficiencies in children with ADHD.
Yes.
Dr. Newmark, Sandy Newmark, feels very strongly that every ADHD child should be tested for iron and zinc. And he agrees with you on trying the big three, gluten, milk, and so forth right away if your child has ADHD and behavior problems. So let's see some great questions here. Let's talk about omega-3s. I think that, one person's wondering whether they, in fact, increase blood sugar. I've read that they do. Do you test that before you start? And how do you find your way among all the different brands, I guess?
I have not seen any studies that looked at blood sugar and omega-3s.
Okay.
That it increases blood sugar. Is that what they're saying?
Yes, that's what they'd heard, right?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Okay.
I can't see any physiological or biochemical reason for that, but
omega-3 capsules, we've heard, person Sandra asks, I've heard that you have to have a certain ratio between EPA and DHA to be effective. Is that your experience?
Well, not exactly. We do think that there should be more EPA than DHA. And when we did a study at Purdue of giving a group of children essential fatty acids, the long chain ones, we gave them a supplement called Effilex, and it was high in DHA and lower amounts of EPA. And we thought afterwards that and looked at other studies, and they had given with more EPA. So we had problems with our results because we used a placebo that was olive oil, and it turned out to be active also, so that the children's behavior improved. But instead of thinking that was a placebo, we also noted that some of the levels of their essential fatty acids changed with the olive oil.
Yeah. Wow. Can we talk sensory processing disorders? A number of kids have problems with aversions to textures of food. And several parents say, my child is very selective in the food he'll eat. He has sensory processing disorders in addition to ADHD. How can you help? Again, this comes back to the question parents frequently ask, how can you help your child actually eat the foods that they need so that they're healthy?
It's tough. Children with autism in particular have problems with this. Some children don't like the lumps. So you could take vegetable soup and puree it, I guess. It's really tough to get a child who doesn't want to eat certain things to try it. And you don't want to have World War II at every dinner. And I think if you have the policy, you have to try a bite and just leave it at that. I've read that it takes as many as 10 times trying that for a child to finally decide to eat the food. So that's one way.
Yeah, for sure. Cold water fish, someone's saying, how concerned must I be about mercury?
Well, that can be a concern. If the the fish have been caught in ocean waters, then it's probably okay. If it's farmed, then it may have some pesticides in the soil. There may be mercury in it, so you have to be more cautious there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so hard to find the right fish to eat.
Right, and it's important. I was just going to say it's important to know that not all fish are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. It's just the cold water ones.
Which are what? What are some cold water?
A fresh canned tuna, salmon, trout, mackerel, and sardines.
Sardines are really healthy, aren't they? Because they have calcium in the bones as well.
They do.
Yeah. What's the biggest thing that people want? The one thing that you should absolutely avoid when you're shopping? Is it red-colored foods? Is there one of the food dyes that's the big culprit?
Well, they haven't really been studied, each one at a time. So we don't really know whether all the dyes are a problem or just one or two or the situation there. So I would avoid them all.
Wow. All right.
I know a mother who has a daughter who is sensitive to just red dye. And I think she eats, and she's not ADHD, but she reacts to it.
Should adults with ADHD also test for, or maybe this is not something that your institute has studied, but a number of people are asking, if you're an adult with ADHD, should you also consider an elimination diet and some of these other basic tests, iron, zinc, and so forth?
Well, considering that children with ADHD grow up to be adults with ADHD, I would think any of these things could apply, but the studies just haven't been done. There haven't been studies in adults of biochemical factors, and nobody's ever studied the effects of dyes on behavior in adults. So we just don't know, and you don't sit down to a bowl of red dye, it's in other things. And so, when I was a child, whenever I drank Hawaiian Punch, I would get a terrible headache. So I just avoided that. But as I grew up and got into this, I realized that Hawaiian Punch had red dye in it.
Wow. If the food is labeled no preservatives or artificial dyes, are we meant to trust that? Even if it has no color? Even if it's colored, I guess, is the question from one of the participants.
Well, I wouldn't think manufacturers would risk not putting that on the label if there were dye in it. I would hope they wouldn't.
I want to come back to your mention of pollens and chemicals. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. There are some children who have typical allergies, and they also have behavior problems due to pollens and molds and things like that. And but you may have another child who has no symptoms of traditional allergies, but actually reacts to the molds and pollens and stuff. So it's just really important to take that into account. And then about the chemicals, there are kids and adults too who are chemically sensitive. I'm one of those. Chemicals make me feel spacey and tired and makes my muscles ache and things like that. So I have to be really careful with the personal care products I use. I use a lipstick that has natural dye in it, and no perfume or scents. These can often be a problem with an ADHD child.
That's interesting. Someone's just talking about the kids trading food at school.
Yeah.
I think the school, people are talking about school as being, a tough place in terms of managing what your child eats.
Yes. Yeah. I have a chapter in there that includes eating out and how you can deal with all that is involved in that.
Right. Let's see. AJ says we use flax oil added to juice as an omega-3/6 supplement. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
You can also, if your child won't swallow it and won't take capsules with the short-chain omega-3 fatty acids, then you could try rubbing it into his skin. And it has kind of a nutty odor to it, maybe a slightly fishy one, but it really works well when it's rubbed in. It's instantly absorbed. You can do this with primrose oil too, but it doesn't work with fish oil. It's too stinky, and nobody will want to go near him except maybe the neighborhood cats who like the smell. I don't know.
Do you have any recommendations on brands of fish oils or supplements, or ways people should go about selecting one for their child?
Well, I think I'd go with the ones that are higher in EPA than DHA, and I don't want to really get into particular brands.
That's fair.
As far as I know, the Omega Bright people who are sponsoring this have not tested Omega Bright with ADHD kids, but it does have a large amount of EPA in it compared to the DHA. I think it's a ratio of 7-1.
Okay, all right. Just before we close, can you recap some questions about your book? Can we go back to that page?
Okay.
Is the book, someone wants to know, is it an ebook? Is it hardback? And where they can buy it?
It's currently
and
a hardback.
Okay.
It has a spiral binding to it because this way there are recipes at the end of the book so that you can lay the book flat on the kitchen table while you follow a recipe.
Oh.
So it will, in a month or two, it's going to be available as an ebook, but that hasn't happened yet.
Okay. Your ADHDnewsletter.com is your website, so
it is.
Everyone check that out.
If you have anybody who wants to email me and ask me a specific question, that would be okay. And I gave my email address, I think, lstevens@nlci.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura, for this presentation. It was
my pleasure.
And sobering
Good
for all
luck
of
to
us.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.